Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man? How are you?
Conrad, I'm doing fantastic. We got college football playoffs. We got Road to WrestleMania coming up. Netflix debuted this incredible show, Monday Night Raw. I'm excited, thrilled to death right now.
We are excited to be back with you. We planned to be bringing you new content last week, but John, you got stuck like Chuck in the middle of nowhere in a snowstorm. Tell us what in the hell's going on, and where were you, and why were you stranded?
Well, I got a New Year's resolution. It's to hit the leprechauns with trash cans, and it's also to clothesline people. So I flew to Wisconsin, 875 miles to hit a leprechaun with a trash can. It was a very successful venture. Got him pretty good. And then I flew to Louisville for OVW with Al Snow, my dear friend, and Doug Basham, who used to be the cabinet, still a good friend. And I was on the tarmac, about to take off, already de-iced. They said, folks, we're going to go to a different runway. We're going to probably take off from there. We go to different runways. Snow gets worse. I'm stuck there 3 days. 3 days I'm stuck in Louisville. I think that's the longest I've been stuck anywhere. Everything was shut down. They had a flight going to LaGuardia. And I got to the airport and I said, listen, can you get me anywhere out of this going east? They said, we can fly you standby to LaGuardia, but you'll be stuck there. I said, well, I can get home from there. I can take the train. So I flew to LaGuardia, then finally got a standby down to D.C. So I'm 3 days in Louisville in a Hilton Garden Inn that was under construction with no restaurant.
Yeah, I mentioned no restaurant because as you were stuck there, I thought to myself, getting stuck in the snow in the South is less than ideal. They'll close the roads. All the businesses will be closed. And if you're a visitor in a regular hotel room with no kitchen and no groceries, what are you going to eat besides snow ice cream that you make in the bathroom sink or whatever? And you said, yeah, there's no restaurant on property. So did you find a Waffle House, or were you on a steady diet of the same restaurant over and over?
There was a Waffle House, I think, was owned by the cartels because it was not a really good clientele there. Okay. A little bit rough. The kitchen looked suspect, but they had good chicken fried steak and good fries and some glass iced tea that appeared to be brewed sometime within the last century. So it worked out fine for me. And then, of course, the gas station across the street had Quest bars and things like that. So it wasn't my diet suffered, but not like I'm a body guy.
Well, we're glad that you're back with us. And listen, I can't believe this is real, but I think we have a clip of you and Hornswoggle. We got to see that. Let's take a look. Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
I love hitting Hornswoggle with trash cans.
I mean, what a moment.
The trash can was actually really heavy. People wonder how I didn't sling it because it was weighed like 40 pounds. So it was like the ultimate potato. So I took him straight to CTE.
I took him straight to CTE. Well, we hope Dylan is feeling okay today.
I don't.
He's gotten himself in good shape too. How about that?
Dylan Hornswoggle looks really good. He's got himself in good shape. He's got a wonderful young son who's playing sports and great shape, training to be a wrestler. Dylan's doing great stuff up there. He's got a great show that he runs. Got a lot of people in his academy that he runs. Dylan's doing absolutely wonderful. I love Dylan.
Super fun crew to work with. Go check them out if you haven't already. Tell them that John sent you. ACW. It's a good time for the whole family. Speaking of the family, I know that you had a little bit of a family reunion at OVW. You know, one of your more famous moments in WWE history is not just hitting little people with trash cans, but running Rudy Boy Gonzalez back across the border. You did this on TV way back when in 2004, and you guys had a little bit of a reunion 20 some odd years later. How fun is that, man? When you get out on the road and make these appearances, it does become like a low-key family reunion, doesn't it?
It is. That's the fun part about going back and doing this stuff. You know, during COVID, I got so bored and I just wanted to see people and do stuff. And now I'm getting to go out and see Rudy Boy. Rudy, it goes by the name Rudy Boy, runs an academy down there. His daughter was there wrestling. Hadn't seen him. I don't know if I've seen him since we did the skit 20-something years ago. You know, obviously I knew Rudy very well. And, you know, this legendary skit that so many people wanted to cancel me over, but it was just fantastic. It was great to see him. I put it out there on the social media new friends in 2025, got something like 20,000 likes and 1,000 or 2,000 retweets. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to see Rudy. Good, really good dude. Wonderful young daughter that's getting into the wrestling business.
Well, I'm glad that you're back at home and settling in. We're going to have a great show today. Our topic is Ask JBL Anything. It's one of our most requested topics. But before we get into it, I did think we needed to address the big thing that happened in wrestling at the beginning of this week. You touched on it. Raw on Netflix. Man, it felt like a major watershed moment for the professional wrestling industry and the company. There's been reports that there were 4.9 million people who watched the debut. Supposedly, at this point, there's more people who've watched that episode of Raw than Squid Games. It is the most watched thing in Netflix history. How much of this is real and how much of this is just hype, we're not sure. But what we know for sure is they had a lot of attention and they had a lot of stars. And man, was it a slick looking presentation. I love the camera angles and the production, and it was cool to see the new building. I know that show was really introducing WWE to a new audience rather than advancing storylines. But it felt big, man. There's not another way to say that. Like when WWE wants to make something feel special, is anybody better at that than them?
Not even close. There's not even a second. I mean, there's nobody close to WWE. And I mean, in all the world of entertainment. And I don't mean just in wrestling. I mean, in entertainment. That was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. That thing was amazing from start to finish. The way they filmed it, the way the crowd looked, all of the different looks that they had for the ring and everything they did. It just looked like something you would see out of 1950s glory day of Hollywood. I mean, it just looked incredible what they did. And by the way, you're going to see now these advertisers, you know, we didn't know if Nielsen ratings were legit or not. These ratings are going to be legit down to the person. Now, the reporting of it may not be. I think these numbers were legit, but, you know, you can always, you know, they say the numbers don't lie, but numberers do. But you're going to see these numbers down to the single person. And you look at things like Google, where they're able to monetize advertising so much and become these multi-billion-dollar companies. You're going to have targeted advertising that you're going to sell at a massive premium because you're going to know exactly who this is going to, how much they're consuming, where they're from, what they buy. It's going to be an incredible seismic change in wrestling and in entertainment.
I can't wait to see what's next. It is going to be a major shift in WWE and all of professional wrestling, I believe. Right now that we see AEW and WWE on streaming, it seems like, you know, we're going to see more opportunity like that in the future. I saw someone speculate online, John. I wanted to get your take on this, that perhaps the most recent contract that AEW signed, their most recent television contract, that might actually be the last major traditional television contract that a wrestling company signs. It seems like streaming is going to be the new horizon, the new frontier. Do you think that major big time wrestling contracts for just television are over with? Does it need to be a combination moving forward of streaming and television, or what say you?
Not yet, because I think voids are always filled. And so you've got a huge void that's being left in the old traditional media right now with WWE going to Netflix, which, by the way, you talk about first about the Netflix deal. You know, we used to run tours overseas based upon what our TV contracts were. So when Germany had a great TV contract, we would run, you know, back in the day, we'd run 23 days in Germany when we filmed Raw once a month. Then we'd run Italy when it was TV contracts were good there, or France or the UK, wherever our TV contracts were good. That's where we would run. And those things changed every few years. So you'd run a few tours to Germany. You might not go back because the TV contract changed. That all doesn't matter now with Netflix because you now are in the entire world. And it takes away the fact that you had to run back in the day, you had to run pay-per-views in the United States because that was your biggest audience. And you didn't need it by time delay, do it in the UK or in Japan or Australia. But because spoilers would get out, it would hurt your pay-per-view sales in the United States. Well, now it's streaming. It doesn't matter. You can run pay-per-views or premium live events now anywhere in the world. You can run Raw anywhere in the world because now it's streaming. You get your revenue in a complete different way. This Netflix deal has literally opened up the entire globe for WWE. I think it's an incredible landmark deal. Now, as far as the legacy media, you're leaving a huge void here. I mean, something like TNA that's selling out everywhere. I mean, these guys will probably get a good TV deal because somebody wants wrestling that's not able to get it because WWE is going to streaming. And that's the 800-pound gorilla. There's a huge void left there. I think you're going to see a pretty good TV contract, and I hope you do, coming for someone like TNA.
Yeah, man, that'd be great. We're all pulling for TNA, pulling for pro wrestling. That's what's great about pro wrestling is it becomes almost like an extended family. It's really just this big community, and everyone is sort of connected to someone else, not just in the industry, but fans too. And unfortunately, we just lost a big member of our wrestling family and someone who is really, really important to you that maybe some of our younger listeners aren't all that familiar with. If you just grew up and are listening today because of Bruce's stories, or maybe you just love JBL on TV, long before there was a JBL character, there was a young man just trying to break in the business. And his riding partner and a guy he looked up to is no longer with us. I wanted to give you a few minutes to tell us about Black Bart, man.
Yeah, Black Bart is a guy that everybody needs in a dressing room. Bart was Bart was everything. Bart was a great worker, and Bart could do anything as far as Bart could be in the first match and he could get over a guy that was just starting like me. They put him in a tag team with me. We were tag team champions in Texas, but Bart did so much more than that for me. Bart could be in the main event. Bart could carry the championship. Bart was the ultimate, carpenter, as we used to call him. He could do absolutely anything. He could carry the company with the title. He could also put over a young guy that needs the push. And in the dressing room, Bart was one of the most beloved guys there is. I mean, anybody who knows Black Bart will tell you the same stories. He'd sit there with his glasses down on his nose, and he'd have a big trash can in front of him. He'd sit there, and he'd push his glasses up like the Longhorn, like that, put it on like that, had a big chaw in his mouth, take his chaw out, put it in his dip can, go wrestle, get his chaw out, and put it back in his mouth. There was nothing like Black Bart. Bart and I were really good friends. I love Bart. He's been such a dear friend to me. But Bart, when I would come into the sportatorium, those walls were paper thin. There's wood paneling walls. And you could hear my cowbell going. And I'd always ring it when I'd come in. And Bart would sit there and that trash can, he'd look down and goes, I hate the sound of that cowbell because that long, tall drink of shit Johnny Hawk's with it. Bart loves me. And I'd come and sit right by him and just mess with him the whole time. We had so much fun. Him and Murdoch were like the biggest, like this. They were so fun. I'm riding with Murdoch and Bart one day, and Murdoch is pinching Bart, on the chest, pinching him. Yeah. Murdoch was a child. And Murdoch was awesome, but he was a child like the rest of us. So he's pinching Bart, and he's pinching Bart on his breast. And so Bart goes, Dickie, I'm going to tell you. You better stop that. And Dickie goes, what are you going to do, you fat bastard? And Bart says, Dickie, and he pushes up his glass. He goes, I love you. Pull the car over. Hey, we're going to find a patch of green grass, and I'm going to teach you a lesson in respect. And he goes, but afterwards, Dickie, we're going to shake hands just like men. And so Dick says, you want to fight me? And Bart goes, I just told you, Dickie, find a patch of green grass. We're going to fight. Now, we're going to shake hands afterwards, but we're going to fight. I'm tired of you messing with me. And so I'm in the back seat. These are two legends. I don't know what to do. I mean, do I break them up? I mean, right. These guys are about to fight on the side of the road. And I'm like, oh, my God, what in the world do I do? So finally, we pull over. Bart gets out. Dickie shuts the door and drives off and leaves him. And I'm just sitting there in the back seat. I'm looking like, you just left Black Bart on the side of the road. I'm sorry, aren't you going to go back? My God. Oh, yeah, they were like children. They were the funniest two people. One time, Bart was convinced I'd stole his hat and coat. And so he told me, he goes, Johnny, I'm telling you, you played that pro football. You was trained by that shooter boy up in Minnesota, but I'm going to find me a patch of green grass, and I'm going to teach you a lesson, you greenhorn asshole. And I said, Bart, I don't have your hat and coat. I said, I don't. And so Bart's convinced I've stolen it. Murdoch walks in wearing Bart's hat and coat.
Oh, God.
Wearing it. Bart turns to Murdoch, and he goes, Dickie, I'm going to tell you, one of these guys stole my hat and coat, and when they find out who it is, I'm going to teach him a lesson. I'm going to whoop somebody's dadgum butt. Bart, he's wearing it. We're all sitting there going, this is a rib. Dickie's wearing it. Bart was still threatening me for a minute. It was insane. Bart was just the most wonderful human being. I had so much fun with Bart. Everybody loved Bart. He was just a real pleasant individual. And people ask me where I learned to cut a promo. Whether I'm any good or not, I don't know, but Bart was. I used to listen to Bart cut promos every single night. You know, we had to do TV because back then you had to do promos for every single venue. So, all right, you got the Von Erich boys and Will Rogers. It's a cage match. Give us 2 minutes, go. And Bart would cut this hell of a promo. Then you say, okay, you got Murdoch and Rhodes, or you got Murdoch and Killer and Waxahachie. You got minute and a half, go. And Bart would cut this promo. But you got to do like 15 or 20 of these every single night after TV. I just sit there and watch Bart. I'm going, every promo was different. Every promo was entertaining. And it's kind of like Cornette, how you'd go off on this rant, screaming rant that somehow made perfect sense and tied back in at the end. And you're going, this guy's a freaking genius. This is really entertaining. So, yeah, so I hate that Bart had cancer for a long time. He fought like crazy. He's a tough guy, but one of the best human beings I've ever met. I'm certainly lucky that he was one of my friends, and also very lucky that I ended up in Texas with Bart, because he certainly helped me out tremendously in so many things.
If you actually go look up your career on cagematch.net and you click on matches and you go and you see what is the oldest match that they have on record for you, it's John Hawk defeats Black Bart at a global television taping at the Dallas Sportatorium on October 9th, 1992. That's pretty crazy to think that, because I don't know that I would have guessed that you and he were even friends before we ever talked about him. And the idea that the oldest match that they can find online for you is you and Black Bart. How cool is that?
Just awesome. I loved Bart, and Bart was so entertaining. I'm telling you, every dressing room needs a Black Bart. He was fun. He ribbed people. He didn't care if he got ribbed. Bart just wanted to be entertained. He didn't care if he was the butt of ribs. He just wanted people to have fun. I was out there working with him, and it was right after that match, and I'm out there. I think Akbar was either his manager or my manager, one of the two. And I roll out, and, back in the day, we didn't get smartened up to nothing. Brad Reingans was a terrific trainer. I love Brad. They didn't smarten you up to Carney. They didn't smarten you up to finishes and vernacular and anything. They just kind of taught you everything about wrestling, but not the inner workings. So I'm out there with Bart, and his potato receipt was he'd club you on the head with this part of his fist, and he'd hit you like this. And I mean, when he clubbed you, it felt like it just broke every vertebra in your neck. He'd hit you so hard when he's mad at you. And so I've done something wrong. He clubbed me, and I thought, I've done something wrong, but I don't know what I've done wrong. I'm so green, and people didn't smarten you up back then. You had to figure it out on your own. And so I thought, well, I've done something wrong. I have no idea what it is. So I punch him back, and then he clubs me again. He goes, "That's a receipt, you greenhorn." And I thought, well, shit, I don't know what a receipt is. So I hit him again. Now he hits me again. He goes, "It's a receipt." And he hits me, and he's almost knocking me out. I'm like, what the fuck do I do? So I roll out of the ring. There's Akbar right there. And this is one of the dumbest things I've ever done in my life. I said, "Ak, what's a receipt?" And Ak says, "You greenhorn idiot." He goes, "A receipt means you're not hitting him hard enough. He wants you to receipt him as hard as he's hitting you. So when he says receipt, you got to pop him." I go, "Well, shit, I can't hit him any harder." So I went back in there, and that happened the rest of the night. Bart was so mad. He came to the back. He threw his branding iron down. He threw his bag down. He wanted to fight me. And I'm like, "Bart, I had no idea what I've done wrong." And then finally Bart found out that Akbar was the one that had told me what a receipt was.
Well, rest in peace, Mr. Black Bart. I just can't believe the connective tissue that you had with him, and to think about y'all's age difference. I just looked that up too. I guess he's like 18 years older than you. And so, when you're really learning from somebody in the business, somebody who's 18 years your senior, and that's a great place to start, isn't it?
It really is. And Bart was one of those guys. Bart trained a lot of people, and trained a lot of people in the ring. So like Dusty, he told the story about Dusty. He wanted him to work with Dustin, but Bart did that with a lot of people. Bart got a lot of people like me and Bobby Duncombe Jr. and got them in the ring. And, he is the old school thing. He wouldn't tell you anything. He'd just get in the ring with you, and he'd try to explain things to you as you're working. I remember one time he had me in the corner, and he goes, "Fire back one time." So I fired back once, and the crowd popped, and I hit him like 6 or 7 more times in a row because I'm thinking, oh man, I'm getting over. And he told me after, he goes, you dumbass, one time. He goes, just listen to me. He goes, it would have worked. And he explained to me why what I did was wrong. But that's how you learn. And that's how you learned back then, was guys like Bart being able to teach you. And I've had, I don't know how many matches. We were tag team partners. We worked against Bart and Johnny Mantell. I worked against Bart by himself. I had so many matches with him. And a lot of it was Akbar out there going, hey, we think this kid might do something. Please help him. And so Bart took me under his wing on purpose. But that's what guys like Bart did back then. You always had to have a guy like Bart who could train you guys on the job. And that's what Bart did.
Well, shout out to Bart and his entire family. I know that making a living in the wrestling business is not only going to take a toll on him, but the entire family. And I hope that he's no longer in pain and he's at peace. And
hey, Cody, let me tell you one quick thing. Just one quick thing about Bart. I want to give a shout out to all the fans out there that have done stuff for Bart, because this is important to me, and it's important to those of us that love Bart. When Bart had the cancer problems, he had like a $600 bill every couple weeks, even though he had insurance. And so, a lot of us guys were helping Bart. And I said, Bart, why don't you set up a GoFundMe? And I wasn't interested in setting up the GoFundMe for money because we were, helping Bart. So the money was going to be taken care of. But I wanted Bart to see the fans reach out to help him, because Bart was professional wrestling 100%. Everything in his life was about professional wrestling. And he was real hesitant. I said, Bart, what's your hesitation? And he said, well, Johnny, he said, I set up a GoFundMe a few years ago and nobody gave anything. And I said, well, Bart, things have changed. When you set it up, you probably didn't have the ability to promote it, and people were different back then. I said, let's set it up again, okay? And I said, let's see what happens. So I had arranged with some other guys, James Beard and several other guys, we were going to make sure he had funding from the GoFundMe. We were going to, if we had to put it under pseudonyms and put it in there, we were going to, make Bart feel good. We didn't have to. Fans reached out in droves. I mean, people were giving $5, $50, $100 to help Bart with his cancer treatments. Bart called me in tears. I mean, it was it was so cool to hear Bart say, I thought the fans had all forgotten old Black Bart. And he said, I just went through it again. He said, I've been through it several times a day and looked at all the names. And he said, it's so cool that people reached out to and helped me. And that meant so much to Bart. So sometimes when you have these GoFundMe pages, it's not necessarily about the money. A lot of times it is, but sometimes it's just about letting people know you care. And whether that's $5 or $10, Bart looked through every single one of those, and he did it many times. And that meant the world to Bart, that fans had not forgotten him. I thought that was really cool.
It's super cool. And we won't forget Bart. And maybe if you didn't grow up watching Black Bart, I just want to remind you that a lot of your favorites drew a lot of inspiration, not just JBL here today, but Dustin Rhodes tweeted out last night, Black Bart taught me a ton in my younger years. Loved him to death. He will be missed. Hashtag RIP. You never know, man. The connective tissue in the way we're all sort of connected here together. And you bring up a great point about GoFundMe. Sometimes, especially if you've been a performer like this under the bright lights for years and years and years, I'm sure that did mean a lot. And I'm glad that you got to share that moment and you were able to share it with us. We appreciate your candor and hope that his family finds peace and contentment. And hopefully he's no longer in pain, and he's watching the matches upstairs now from the skybox.
That's right. He can go fight with the Von Erichs again. Oh my God. They were like dogs and cats backstage, much less in the ring. Oh my God. He waffled, I think, Kevin one time with his branding iron, and Fritz called him, what are you doing? And Bart, typical Bart, well, he won't sell, so I had to make him.
Oh gosh. Can you imagine? He won't sell. I had to make him.
Yeah.
Well, let's do some questions. We got a live studio audience with us this morning from adfreeshows.com. Appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. We're going to go right to one of your questions. We'll start with Aaron Sheen. With it being John Cena's farewell tour, what is a match that stands out to you, either against you or watching live? You've seen a lot of big-time John Cena performances, whether it's in the ring with him or sitting ringside. Is there one John Cena match that you saw in person that stands out above all the rest?
Oh, hell yeah. The match with Umaga. And I think it was, I can't remember, it was Royal Rumble or Survivor Series or what, SummerSlam or In Your House. I just, you try to remember these things, from years ago. They all blend together because you're working every single week. But it was with Umaga. I think it was in San Antonio, I believe. But I was not calling the match, I don't think, because back then you had the split announce desk. So me and Michael Cole were on SmackDown, King and JR were on Raw, and I believe it was a Raw match, I think, because I don't think I was calling it, because I think I remember, because I did this a lot during Cena's matches when I wasn't calling them. I would take off my headset and just sit there and listen like a fan, because I had the best seat in the house. I'm sitting there at ringside. And that's when Umaga did the run across the 3 tables and the big splash and Cena moved. To this day, that was one of the greatest matches I've ever seen. I just remember watching that and thinking that was why I love professional wrestling. It was that good. It was just amazing to watch. And it was so cool because I had a ringside seat, better than a ringside seat, because I'm actually inside the bowl, and I didn't have to do commentary. So I just got to sit there and enjoy the match. And I remember sitting there watching and going, man, these two guys they're next level. This is so fun to watch.
We should mention that according to Cage Match again, there were 2 matches in San Antonio, believe it or not, with John Cena and Umaga. There was one on Monday Night Raw, a 5.5-minute affair back in 2006. It was July 17th, 2006. But I guess the one you're talking about is Royal Rumble 2007 in San Antonio. It was a last man standing match that went 23 minutes. That is the match that Bruce Pritchard put in near the top of the list of a great what if, what could have been. Like, we know that Umaga left us way, way too soon. But I think everybody should go back and take a look at that one and think about, with all the success of the bloodline right now, man, can you imagine if you had a time machine, what that could have looked like?
Yeah, and Umaga, by the way. Umaga grew up, I guess, in Samoa. I don't think it's Fijian. I think it's Samoan. And anyway, he grew up in the islands. He played high school football barefoot. So can you imagine looking back there and seeing this 240-pound monster barefoot? You're like, screw this. Screw this. I ain't tackling him. He was a super I remember one time we were in a elimination chamber or something, and he stepped on the grate, and I knew this story about him, and he stepped on the grate, and I could feel him flinch a little bit with his feet, and I thought, if that tough son of a bitch is hurt, don't open this freaking pod. I'm like, I ain't coming out. I'm not coming out. And some fan at that time yelled, "Hey, JBL, you fat ass, what are you doing in there?" And I looked around. I go, I don't know. I'm scared to death. It was shocking to see Umaga sell the grate. But what a match, and what a great worker Umaga was.
Let's do another live question here from our live studio audience. Coach Rosie wants to know, Mr. Layfield, would you like one more crack at John Cena on his farewell tour?
Of course. Yeah, because I think the world of John. And I was so happy that I was part of John's, formative career. I don't take any credit for anything John did. John would be exactly where he is now, with or without me. I'm just glad that I was one of the ones that was there at the start. But John's such a great guy. I mean, everything about him. I mean, the more you know about John, from his Make-A-Wish, what he does, to how he interacts with fans, to how he interacts with talent, what he's done for talent. I mean, it's just amazing. So would I? Yeah, of course. It's not going to happen, by the way. There's absolutely zero talk of it. And he's got much bigger fish to fry. There's so many great matchups out there for John. And, I hope he wins the title. I think it'd be cool to see, it's like the 4-minute barrier in the mile. You want to see it broke. It's this legendary, you want to see Judge break Babe's record. You want to see stuff like this happen in life. You don't know when it could ever happen again. Randy looks like he's getting up to that point where he may be the guy that breaks it as well. But I'd love to see that. And I can't wait to see what all John does in the next few months.
We're about 3 weeks away from the Royal Rumble. I'm just thinking he's already declared that he's there. If a white limousine with horns was there and there was a clothesline from hell one last time, I'd be for it. I'm just saying. Kelly Cox is with us here live, and he wants to know, how did you feel about Cena replacing the undisputed title belt with the spinner? And were you surprised they continued to keep that design for so long?
I had no problem with it. Storyline wise, of course, my character had massive problems with it, but the traditional guy. Now, the good thing about it is, as you can see up here, I've got the original title up there. I don't know how to get there right there.
There you go.
The original title up there. And I actually think that may be the title. I'm not sure. I think I ended up with it. I'm not sure they know I have it. So they do now. But they may ask for it back. I had no problem with it. Everything changes, and Cena was so popular, and he was going to a different crowd. We're trying to get out of the Attitude Era and go into this G-rated era. I thought it was perfectly fine. I thought it was great. I had no issue with it. Now, my character obviously had huge issues with it because JBL is JBL.
Chris North is with us here live, and he says, a lot of us have been seeing the stories of you bringing rugby to underserved and underprivileged kids. What sparked your interest in rugby to begin with? Yeah, we've never really talked about that. How did you get into rugby? How did this all come to be, John?
I went down to the South Africa for the 2010 World Cup, the football, soccer, depending on where you are, what you call it, a World Cup. And I got a chance to go because my wife had done some things in finance, and she was invited down there to the Rugby World Cup, and I got to go with her. I was like the Stedman for Oprah. I was carrying her bags. So like we walked to a red carpet, and I immediately walked to the camera. Then I realized they had no interest to talk to me because it's all about her. So I really thought, hey, I'm Stedman, which I've met Stedman before. He's actually a very nice guy. We have a lot in common, apparently. But we were down in South Africa, and we were going to go to Robben's Island, and we were going to go with Nelson Mandela. I mean, I never got to meet him, Diba, but we were supposed to go with Mandela, but that's when he first started getting sick. And so he couldn't go that day. So, I mean, God, Lord, man, I almost got to go to Robben's Island with Nelson Mandela. And so he couldn't go, but Desmond Tutu went. So I went with Desmond Tutu. It was a wonderful experience, incredible experience, seeing the cells they were in, talking about the prisoners, that the guards that they dealt with, how Mandela handled it, how Mandela said hate has to skip a generation. He wouldn't allow retribution to the prison guards. So I got back. I got all this in my mind about this incredible experience, but what an unbelievable point in time and heroes that came through like Mandela and Tutu. And the Desmond Tutu and some others are going to the shanty town that's right outside of Cape Town, that huge shanty town, to look at this program called Mighty Milers the next day. It was a running program to help kids get educated and get them out of the shanty town and give them job opportunities. So they said, you want to go? I said, I'd love to. So my wife and I went with them, Minister Tutu. And when we got back, I just moved to Bermuda, and I'd seen all these problems with gangs. So I called a guy, Nick Keller, who ran Beyond Sport. And I said, how do you set up a program to work with kids? And he goes, well, you need a program that's easy and cheap to run, something like soccer or rugby. And I said, well, I don't know anything about soccer, football, as they call it in Europe. And plus, they had legacy issues of drugs and gang use in Bermuda because they'd been there a while. Football was rugby was pretty much a white expat sport. The local kids didn't play it. So I was able to introduce a sport to the island and get it in the schools that the kids didn't play. That way I could put my own procedures and standards around it to hopefully help these kids. And so we started up a rugby program. I knew nothing about rugby. I watched it some, but it all became, we hired a wonderful young man, Patrick Callow, out of Northern Ireland, that was a coach. We got it in every single one of the schools. We had a 100% graduation rate for the kids there, 100% non-incarceration rate. Won an award out of, I think, 17 countries and about 7,000 programs for being the best with working with at-risk kids, but not because of me, but because it became a true island-wide initiative. And since then, I've done rugby programs literally all over the world. I've been down to Malawi, been down Tanzania, physically, as in making the bricks, helped build a school down in Malawi in a rugby program where I have about 1,000 kids, I believe, still in the program down there. And I work with Memphis Inner City Rugby now. That is one of the best, has just been named the best by Spotlight, I believe it's Spotlight or Searchlight, whatever it was, Paul Tudor Jones' old program that evaluates charities. It's the best as far as return on investment of any charity they've dealt with, as far as getting kids out of poverty. And again, we have a 100% graduation rate and 100% non-incarceration rate and some of the worst child poverty in Memphis. And it all uses rugby. Rugby is a great sport. You can play 5-on-5, play 15-on-15. All you need is a ball. And that's one of the reasons, the beautiful game of soccer, very much the same way. It's a cheap sport that you can take to low-income, at-risk kids.
Look at you, dude. Good guy, John. I thought you were a heel. What the fuck?
Don't tell anybody.
It's a secret. Chris North has another great question. Pat McAfee was discussing Michael Cole trying to convince him to detour back to Houston earlier this week. Do you have a favorite Michael Cole road story? How was Michael whenever you guys would travel together? Were you the wheelman? Was he the wheelman? Do you have any fun Michael Cole travel stories?
Michael was always the wheelman because Michael is I told you before, we're the odd couple. I was one Felix or Oscar, whichever one was the messy one. I was the messy one. Michael was the one that was the one that was in charge and could get everything straight. Michael would love to drive because I think he loved to be in control. And plus he would text the whole time. So I'm like, I would sit there and just drink and let Michael drive. But I had a lot of fun traveling with Michael. Michael rode with me and Ron when he first started. I mean, we've been around Michael the whole time. We had a great story up in Montreal where, wow.
Oh,
yeah. It was a great story.
I love you for that. OPW Chris has a question on Twitter. He says, what was the reaction in the locker room when you found out WCW was being purchased by the WWF? And how easy or difficult was it for the WCW talent that came over to acclimate to a new environment?
I don't know how easy it was because you'd have to ask them. It seemed like they acclimated pretty well. They had apparently an issue with the ring size, which I can understand if that's the only ring you ever worked in. They had much smaller rings than we did. And so they took them to Titan Towers. That's, I guess, where the fight happened with Shane Helms and Buff Bagwell was getting acclimated to those rings. But apparently, I think they got along pretty well. Buff had problems. There was some heat there for whatever reason, and Buff didn't last very long. But as far as the rest of the guys, they're one of us. It's not like when we fought WCW that we hated those guys. We didn't hate them. They're working just like we are. They're just trying to find a place to work. And if we had gotten fired at WWE, we'd have tried to go to WCW and vice versa. So I don't think there was any animosity between the boys. There may have been between the higher ups that were trying to put each other out of business, which if you say anything different, I would contest that, by the way. I think that was the goal of both sides. But I didn't think there was a huge problem with the acclimatization of the talent to our roster.
Real Cable Guy 1 on Twitter had a follow-up sort of about what you said there, because you mentioned Buff, and Real Cable Guy 1 on Twitter says, why did JBL powerbomb Buff Bagwell at the house when he first joined the company? He has spoken at length and said him and Ron were cool, but you did it out of nowhere. He said that shit hurt. Simply just why? You already knew Vince judged him for that, and it probably sealed his fate. I'll be honest, I don't even know what he's talking about here, but I suspect that maybe you do. Did you have an interaction with Buff in the WWF that was less than ideal?
I didn't know it until later. Buff said I tried to end his career. I think he said in a tweet sometime, which is absolute bullshit. It didn't happen. He said, why did I do that? Because I was told to do it. And it wasn't like, hey, punish this guy. That was what was called. I was supposed to powerbomb him at the end of the night. And that's what we did. Did exactly what the office told us to do. And did I throw him down hard? Yes, absolutely. That's how we played back then. We played rough. And I did that with Eddie Guerrero. I did that with Undertaker, Booker T, you name it. We did it. It was the same. And I don't know if Bagwell he did take exception to it because he said some stuff about it in the sense. But there was no malice there. If you want to hurt a guy, you throw him on his shoulder, you throw him on his head. You don't throw him flat. You throw him flat, you're taking care of him. And what I did was throw him flat. Hard, absolutely, 100%. But that's what we did with everything. And it was dark, but it was also being filmed. So you don't know when it's going to be used. And so that's, I remember we were some match, we had done a run, 2 or 3 run-ins, and Stone Cold pulled me aside, and it was for the dark part, and he kind of ripped me pretty good. And the only time Steve ever did that, by the way, and he was right. He said, man, you got to lay it in on me. And he said, you can't take it easy on me. He thought we were taking it easy on Steve, because, he was Steve. He didn't know he didn't know we were blown up. That we can barely get in the ring. And I told him, I said, Steve, I'm sorry. I said, I'm blown up. But Steve was one of the ones, you got to lay it in on me, especially me, because people are watching with more eyeballs. Now, he didn't say that, in an arrogant way. Steve's one of the best guys I've ever met. But that's how we played back then. And so the thing with Bagwell, it's, I don't know. It's kind of blamed a lot of things for his run going wrong. And I don't know about any of that. The match, he just had the match with Booker, which didn't go very well. And I think he kind of conflated everything and thought that I tried to hurt him or something, which is absolutely 100% not true. You can look at it. It's on tape. I did exactly what the office told me to do. Hit him with the power bomb. Did I hit him hard? Absolutely. But that's how I would have wanted to be hit, and that's how I would have done with Stone Cold or anybody else.
And to be clear, Buff's on a new path these days. I mean, he's, from what I've heard, a totally different guy. His recovery is going phenomenally well, and we're pulling for Buff and know he's going to be the next great success story. But perhaps some of these comments were coming from a darker place.
They could have been, and I assume they were, because I sent him a text when he did that. I sent him, I guess, on social media or something, and he responded. And he said, hey, that's what I heard or something like that. And I said, well, you were there. You didn't have to hear it from somebody, and maybe somebody told him that. And maybe that was, a time when he was fighting some demons. I saw him at the Hall of Fame, and, he's gotten himself cleaned. He's gotten himself in terrific shape. And I think good for him. There's zero. I saw him recently, and he goes, hey, let's talk about, why you hated me. I said, Puff, I didn't hate you. Never did. Didn't like you, dislike anything. I didn't know you. And so I'm happy for him that he's got everything together, and he seems like he's in a wonderful place. And again, you're right. This could have come during a time that when he said these things about that there were some demons that he was fighting. Which God bless him and Diamond Dallas Page. Diamond Dallas Page is going to deserve a freaking block in heaven. That man, I saw Butterbean recently, and I love Butterbean. I'm a huge fan of Butterbean, the four-round king, and he's doing so well. And all that's due to Diamond Dallas Page. God bless that man.
Yeah, Buff had 3 dates with WWE. I know everyone believes it was actually just the one, the pretty infamous match with Booker T. But that happened at the Tacoma Dome on July 2nd on Monday Night Raw. The night before, they were in Spokane, Washington. It was Buff and Booker T, July 1st. But the day after that Raw match, July 3rd, once again, it was the Tacoma Dome. And I think that's probably where it happened. It was Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page, and then there's a big schmoz with lots of running.
It could have been it. I'm conflating. I didn't know if it was the same day that you had the match or not. And you're right, because I think after the match, we were talking to Booker, and I think it was the next day. But look, it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, but it was I think when people think about Buff and WWE, they think it was just one day. It was 3 days, 2 matches against Booker T, and then a run in on SmackDown. And that was all she wrote in Buff and WWE. But the last chapter on Buff has not been written yet, and it will be a good one.
And Buff had a great look. Buff had a great look. He was. I didn't watch a lot of WCW, but like I didn't watch ECW. We were working every night. It seemed like he was a good worker, and I say seemed. I'm not taking a shot at him. I didn't see him work that much. Just I would see his character some, some clips, back before we didn't have social media back then, but whatever you would see it, and he could talk, and he seemed like a fit. And I don't know what happened. I wasn't part of, wasn't there when whatever happened with Shane Helms. I wasn't there in the ring when whatever happened with Booker. So I don't know what all happened.
We got another one here from Gil Boldberg. I screw that up every time. He switches it around. Gil Boldberg? Yeah, wow. What a tongue twister. What led to JBL getting a contributor gig at Fox News? Considering the level of stigma it has, did WWE have any hesitancy about taking on a gig like that? That is pretty wild. I don't think a lot of people expected to see you all of a sudden on Fox Business and other Fox networks. You became a talking head on the news. Like, wait a minute. What's going on here? How does that happen, John?
Well, it happened, I played a little pro football, and I didn't make any money. I made like the World Football League at the time. I think paid you like $40,000, and then I got a starting bonus. I think we led the league in rushing or quarterback sacks, something like that. We had Ricky Blake, who broke his leg, would have been a great running back for the Cowboys, but broke his leg in training camp. So I think I made like 55 or 60,000 something for that year for World League, which isn't a lot of money. You know, it's more money than I ever made. Don't get me wrong. I was very happy with it, but I bought into a travel agency. And when I did, as an investment, best investment I ever made, I went to Hawaii with my college roommate. I went to the Cayman Islands where I met a bunch of the wrestlers down there on tour. The first time I'd met a bunch of wrestlers. And so I come back the next year and I get cut and I don't have any money left. And it wasn't because I'd love to say it was because of drugs and women, but it wasn't. It was boring. It's just life. And I bought some stuff and trying to live. And so I promised myself if I ever made money again, I would figure out what to do with it. And I always was a fan of like Howard Hughes and guys like that, back in the day. That was our, Elon Musk. And so I started reading everything I could on finance. And that's where I came up with the idea, because Foley had written the book, had been very successful, and other guys had written books. I said, man, I'd like to write a book on finance because these books I think are terrible. And there was like a Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. It was written like a narrative. I thought I'd like to write a book with a bunch of wrestling stories and make it a narrative. And that way you can pick up one chapter and read it, or pick up the front of the book and read it from start to finish. But it's an interesting read, but it also teaches you a little bit about finance. That was the idea of the book, Have More Money Now. And so when I wrote it, it did okay. I mean, exceeded expectations. When you got WWE pushing something, it tends to do very well. And so I'd gone on to Fox to promote the book. In fact, the first show, that's where I met my wife. She was on leave from a garden leave from a hedge fund. And she was just on there doing something, talking about finance before she called the financial crisis. And so that's where I met my wife. But then I started living in New York City once I got married. And in Texas, now this all fits together, believe it or not. In Texas, where I grew up, Nolan County, Sweetwater, Texas, was the wind capital of the world. And everybody's putting up windmills everywhere. We grew up, it was very poor when I was in high school. It was very rich when I was in junior high because oil prices had gone south. They thought the oil fields had been depleted. There's no more oil. It was almost poverty level. Well, windmills came back first, and it made everything. These ranchers now were making $5,000 a turbine a month off these turbines that didn't take up much of their land. They could still use it. It was a great deal for the ranchers and a great deal for the West Texas. So my buddy calls me and says, hey, man, would you like to see if we can buy 100 or 200 acres and put a wind farm together? And we had some land that was great wind, land, as they measure it. Everything out there was great wind land, wind you could see, for 400 miles. There's no trees out there in West Texas. And I said, it'd be a great idea. So we worked with GE. We went to an investment bank first. They're in New York, around the corner of Water and Wall. And we got this investment bank. It was about a $75 to $85 million deal. And we got the turbines arranged to buy from GE. We had the land arranged to be bought, but it was all contingent on everything else. Well, the renewable energy credit in renewable energy, especially for wind, is how you made money. 1.5 cent credit was how you made money for the wind farm. That imploded during that time. Politics, not renewing it, all kinds of things happened. When that imploded, that killed our margins. So we no longer had the viability of this wind farm. So we had to scuttle the whole deal after we'd done all this work on it. And, sucked, because we we already spent, as they say, we already spent the money. We were sure that we had a home run here, and we did if the renewable energy credit market had not imploded like it did. And so I went to the bank. I said, hey, it's not going to work. You guys are great. And they said, well, would you come work for us? We love what you did with the wind farm. And so I went to work for the investment bank, and that was right when I was kind of coming out of the ring the first time. And so I was a vice president at this bank, and we did small micro cap deals. We did anything micro cap, a lot of renewable energy, a lot of fossil fuels. We also did some nutrition stuff. We did, any type of micro cap. What we did is we stayed underneath Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs was on 85 Broad. We were on Water and Wall. And you can always tell when Goldman did a deal because Stone Street, the oldest street in the country, I guess it is, the cobblestone street, was full of bankers with expense cards and a lot of pretty women from all over the place because they knew Goldman had done a big deal. But all you could do is deals underneath Goldman. You couldn't compete with Goldman back then. Probably can't now. I don't know the landscape now. But anyway, as I'm doing that, Fox thought it was interesting that this former professional wrestler was working on Wall Street. So it wasn't just that I'd written a financial book, and it wasn't just the oddity of a professional wrestler. That was a huge part of it. by the way, but a huge part of it. But a lot of it was I was working on Wall Street, so I was a legitimate Wall Street guy. So that's kind of how the whole Fox thing happened. And I started doing the Fox stuff and worked for Fox. We did the Saturday morning shows, cashing in Bulls and Bears. I switched between both. And by the way, that's #1 show on Fox for the entire weekend, whichever show I was on, the Bulls and Bears and cashing in. And then things switched when Lachlan Murdoch came in and wanted to be live with everything. We taped these on Friday. So that killed that Saturday morning deal. And then Fox, in my opinion, became too political. And so at that point, I had a chance to do some more with them and chose not to. So the politics did play a part of it, but not till later. Because back then I was just doing finance and I wasn't really doing or supposed to be doing political stuff. Yeah, but it was something that was just a finance. But when that changed significantly, that's when I opted out of Fox.
Man, what a great story. You and I haven't spent a lot of time talking about financial stuff, and I'm sure he'll reveal it all when he's ready. Have you taken a look at any of the stuff Eric Bischoff's working on right now?
Have I ever?
Is that not the best thing ever?
It is awesome. And it may be above my pay grade, but it is awesome. It is really interesting stuff.
When Eric reveals that, it'll be global news, won't it?
Yeah, I agree. Wall Street's gimmicked, man. I say gimmicked. It's rigged. People say it's not rigged. Bullshit. Yeah, it is. I mean, you have the guys that have money have access. Now, that doesn't mean you can't compete and ride along with them and do pretty well. But the guys with the big money, they have the access. Dodd-Frank came along, and they talk about trying to redo the entire financial market. Dodd-Frank were the guys that were watching the chicken coop when it got raided. Yeah. And all of a sudden, they're the ones making the rules. That doesn't work in any level. I mean, these guys in D.C., they're not smart enough to know what these financial guys are doing. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be regulated. Yeah, they should be regulated, but not by these morons in D.C.
Well said, boy, because, there's going to be a lot of changes, I think.
Which goes to your point about Eric Bischoff, which, we won't give too much away, but he's got something there, and this system's gamed. There's no doubt about it.
He stumbled across something, not to give everybody too big of a tease, because I think Eric's working on whittling this down, and maybe you'll see something in the next few weeks. But when I first saw it a few months ago, maybe it was 4 or 5 months ago when he first brought it to me, I didn't really get it. And then he sent me some links, and I saw some charts and graphs, and it clicked, and it was like, how has everyone not noticed this? And I can't wait for that reveal. Hey, here's a great question from Anson My Eyes Jones. He says, any good stories from the brief time in Global? How was working with Ian and Axel? What was your first time like meeting Terry Gordy? Early Global was a big part of my fandom, and it's fascinating to see how much talent was there. I kind of forgot that Ian and Axel Rotten were there.
They live right by me in Duncombe. And when I say Duncombe, it's Duncombe Jr., obviously, not Mr. Duncombe, and Bobby. And they live right by us. And we had an apartment. We always joked about they check you for weapons when you went in. If you didn't have one, they gave you one because it was rough in there. We lived past the freaking hood. Murdoch goes, I ain't coming down there. I need a freaking gun to get to your apartment. It's all we could afford. And Ian and Axel lived just right down the same apartment complex from us, just right down there. Good guys, just trying to make it like me and Bobby were. We had a lot of fun. I mean, Global was awesome, man. You had some incredible talent. When I was there, I still got to work with the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. Now, years past their rivalry, but they were still drawing houses. And back then, drawing was different than what it was during the heyday of the Von Erichs. Basically, we're giving away everything for free and making money off concessions. Literally, that's what it was. You had to pay for parking, and you had to pay for concessions. So they're giving tickets away for free. So we're sold out all the time when we had a good show, but people weren't paying, but they had to pay in different ways.
You didn't run into Bruce at all in Global, though, right? Y'all just missed each other.
Nope. I sent you that boxing match. It's the worst match in the history of wrestling that he did with James Beard. But
we got to watch that one day here on YouTube.
Oh, my God. We got to watch that. Gerald Briscoe, I think, has watched it 20 times.
It's outstanding. We'll push a link out through social.
It was great in Global. I grew up as a Global fan, not a Global fan, Sportatorium fan. And so these were still the same guys that I watched growing up. You know, Bill Irwin was there. Johnny Mantell was there. The Von Erichs were there. The Freebirds were coming in. Akbar was there. I got to room with Gary Hart on the road. I mean, it was so cool to be around these guys that had drawn so much money in Texas, and were still there. And it was a good place. My first night, I went out with Manny Fernandez and Butch Reed till about 4 o'clock in the morning. I thought, oh my God, I mean, it's not like they're going to scare me. You know, I'd been pretty wild in my football days as well. So it wasn't, those guys were a different level. It was one point Manny, who threw a guy through a window in our local bar there, and I think it was Garland, somewhere in Dallas, Texas, threw a guy through a window. Manny was wild. And then him and Butch, not that night, it was a different night. At the end of the night, they cut us off, and Manny just grabs the beer mugs and just throws them over his head and hits a bunch of people. And it's just, I thought, this is quite strange. I think I'm going to do well
here. He's looking for a fight to throw him over his head.
100% he's looking for a fight. Manny loved to fight. I mean, loved to fight. He was good at it. He was good at it.
Jay, cold_insomnia on Twitter says 3 current wrestlers from any company today that JBL would love to have had a feud with during his time. When you think about, when you're in your wrestler prime, if you will, and you had a time machine and you could mix it up with somebody you see out there today, who would be on that short list, John?
Short list, Cody Rhodes, no doubt about it. He's the guy. He's the face of the company, but also the size difference. I worked really well with guys that I had a size advantage to. I understood that very well. Also worked, I thought, pretty well with guys that I had a size advantage with where they were much bigger, which there's not a lot of people. I was 6'6", about 280. So, I was one of the bigger guys, but, you had Big Show, you had Undertaker and Kane. You had some guys like that, that I really enjoyed working with. But Cody Rhodes, I mean, that would be so fun. I think so much of Cody. I love Cody since the JBL and Cole show. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to work with Cody. I tell you, the other guys I work with, I would love to work with Jacob Fatu.
Oh, yes.
That kid is a kid. He's a grown man. He's awesome. My God, that'd be so much fun to work with a guy like that who could do so much stuff. I mean, that would be a blast. I mean, that would be so much fun to do. And the other guy, you mentioned 3 people. The other guy, Dolph, Nick. I mean, Dolph I've never seen Dolph had a bad match. And I saw him have matches with Del Rio, and my style and Del Rio was similar. Del Rio's better than me, but style is similar. And I see how that style works. There's just an old simple style when a heel is bigger and can beat up the baby face, and that baby face works from underneath. And Dolph has such incredible fire and is so talented. I think we could really have some good matches.
That brings up an interesting question. Nick wants to know, was there a style of wrestling or a wrestler that you enjoyed working with the most? I've heard a story about Lesnar really enjoying smaller / super athletic types like AJ Styles and Bryan Danielson. Is that the same for you, or do you prefer a different style?
No, styles work, and I worked some with Brock. I'd love to work a program with Brock. Just didn't work out. When I had my run, Brock was off, winning a UFC championship. So it never worked out. Then I retired and did commentary. But, man, it would be so much fun to work with Brock. He's so freaking talented. And he's safe because he's so freaking strong. I loved working with Mark Henry. I had a decent time with Jeep Swenson back in the day. It was fun for me to work with the big guys because it was something completely out of my norm. Normally I was a much bigger guy, but it was so much fun being that guy that could sell guys. I've always thought, man, I'd love to have worked with San Martino. I mean, that would have been awesome, man, to work with that big, tough guy. I'd love to work with Magnum TA. That's my dream match of all time. Big, tough guy like that could work. I loved those guys like that. And then I also liked the other way, the Rey Mysterios.
Okay.
You had to make them work from underneath. And guys that had a lot of fire like Ray, man, it was just heaven being out there with those guys.
But you do prefer working as a heel?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't know the question was just about
No, it wasn't. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to be working a smaller guy, it's always you're the heel. And
I was a terrible baby face. So, yeah, I was horrible. I don't know if I was any good as a heel, but I was terrible as a baby face.
What a great line. Smokey wants to know, who has the best lariat in the business currently outside of JBL himself, of course.
That's interesting. I've seen, Raquel has a pretty good clothesline that I've seen. I saw the guy, the old school guy in OVW. I can't think of his name with the mustache and the real good throwback. It's interesting. I've tried to teach the clothesline that I have to people. It's never worked. I took Luke Harper aside and tried to teach it to him, and I think I know how to explain it, but obviously I don't because I couldn't teach it. I showed Baron how to do it, and Baron's a really smart guy and an athletic guy. So is Luke Harper, and I never could explain to people how to do it, and I don't know why I can't. I feel like I can tell you exactly how I do it, but I've never been able to give it to somebody to do it. And I learned it in Japan over a 4 or 5 week tour from Kendo Nagasaki, because when I went over there, I was basically using the Barry Windham lariat because Gary Hart had done me a favor and said I was Barry Windham's cousin because I'm from Sweetwater, and Mulligan claimed he was from Sweetwater. Always hated that because I didn't want to pretend I was Wyndham's cousin. I always wonder if I had heat, which Barry had never even heard of it. But because of the look of Barry Windham, I used the lariat. And so when I got over to Japan, Kendall said, you don't do it very well. And so every day I would do it different. Every night I would do it different. And Kendall worked with me over a 5 week tour, and I developed it over 5 weeks and developed something pretty unique. But I've never been able to teach it. And by the way, you had a question about Gordy earlier. Gordy's where I got the clothesline. Okay. Terry Gordy threw the clothesline almost exactly like I throw it. I throw it like he throws it. In fact, I was working with Gordy one time, and I thought, this son of a bitch is stealing all my stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking he's doing all my moves. I'd forgotten that I'd stolen it from him so long before. I'm literally getting hot at Gordy because he stole my stuff. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm right here. I'm right here.
So great. TWL36 says, if John could give the clothesline to hell to anyone in the world, who would he pick and why? So I think we're looking for a non-wrestling answer. So you're going to give this to a non-wrestler, maybe. Who would this be?
Wow, there's a few. There are a few politicians that I really dislike on both sides of the aisle. There's a few people out there that I'm not sure I want to give any press to by even mentioning their names. That's how much I dislike them. So I don't dislike many people. There's just a couple out there. But I see it all the time. People send me stuff, from soccer games or from rugby games or something, or basketball games, going, hey, does this clothesline work? And so it's pretty cool to be known for it, at least.
Boy, here's a question that I've gotten 182 times since you and I started doing the podcast. B at LFC fan 1982 on Twitter says, why is John always portrayed as a bully? When listening to him on the podcast and how he handles himself overall, I think most of us have a different opinion of him now after listening to these podcasts. That is something that I get peppered with all the time since we started doing this show. Man, I decided I would never listen. And then my friend said that, no, you should listen. And I hated him, but man, I really like him on the podcast. And I've always felt like when I first met you, like, man, what a great job you did at portraying that character on TV. But I guess there is this narrative out there where, tell a friend, telegram, tell a wrestler, whatever it is. And so now these legends just grow and these stories take on a life of their own. But if I was a heel, I don't know that I ever would have tried to change that narrative. Oh, you mean I'm an asshole? Well, I wanted you to boo. I don't think I'll challenge that. Keep thinking I'm an asshole. Is that what happened, or is there more to it than this?
I think there's probably more to it, but that's a lot what happened. And there's a couple things. One, I was always a heel, so I didn't want to correct people and say, oh, by the way, I'm a good guy. I think you just come across terrible when you say that. I think it kills any type of heat you have. So, there was a story a while back that I was mean to Chris Kanyon because he was gay. And there's a couple real issues with that. Number one, I marched in the first gay pride parade in Bermuda. I'm a huge advocate for equality in gay marriage. I don't care who you marry. Ain't none of my damn business. So that's a big issue. A bigger issue was no one knew he was gay.
Right.
He was there. No one knew. People talk about, the Undertaker did this or then that. Nobody knew, and nobody would have cared, by the way. I mean, absolutely 100% wouldn't have cared. But if I come out and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm really a good guy, I marched in the Gay Pride Parade, I'm actually for equality, and all of a sudden you just look like a freaking douche by trying to defend yourself or rewrite history. And so a lot of that is, a lot of that's me not taking anybody to task over it and letting stuff run rampant, in some cases even fueling the flames a little bit. And some of it could be true. Look, I'm not trying to rewrite history. I'm not trying to rewrite my legacy. Whatever I did, I did. And, I hope I wasn't an asshole, but if I was, I've apologized to most people. As you live long enough and you have a good time, you do things that you regret. But a lot of these things, are, some are myth, and some are just, it's me not wanting to get into a fight on Twitter and say, hey, I didn't do that, or I did do this, or anything about that.
I want to be clear too. We just talked about the Mauro Ranallo circumstance a couple of weeks ago here on the show, and I knew what really happened when it happened. And you and I don't know that we ever even had a real conversation, but we know that story was about someone else. That was never about you. But the online narrative became that it was about you, and you never corrected it, because that would have meant. And anyone who's listened to this show for more than 2 episodes since you've been with us knows that you're not going to throw anybody under the bus. Nope. What you're not going to do is stooge off anyone or fade the heat to anyone. And it is what it is. So you just took the L on that one. And the people who know, well, that's not true. Ask Mauro. That's not what happened.
Right.
But the internet went crazy with it. But because you didn't say, oh, no, actually, it wasn't me, it was so-and-so, which is what respectfully a lot of other people would do. You just took it on the chin, and it just grows. And I don't know. I don't think you've been given a fair shake. And I think the listeners of this show now realize that.
That's very kind. And a lot of it was, we ribbed incessantly. And a lot of it, I outgrew my generation. I outlived my generation. Our generation, we ribbed all the time, and we thought it was fun. And was it hazing? Could have been. Yeah, it might have been. Was it too strong? Of course it was at times. Anytime you do stuff like that, inherently you're going to get too strong. But I didn't care if I was the one being ribbed. I'm like Bart a lot in that respect. I didn't care if I was the one being ribbed. I didn't care if you were the one being ribbed. I just wanted to be entertained. We were bored. We didn't have internet. We didn't have a lot of stuff. And so a lot of that just came about by, I think people misinterpreting. I don't know that. I don't know that for sure. The only person you can talk to is the people that have made these claims. And again, I've never wanted to address the claims, because you look like such a douche when you go, oh, hey, listen, that didn't happen. And it looks like you're apologizing for stuff. And I didn't think that was what I want to do. It's certainly not what I want to do. I can spend a lot of my time trying to correct the perception of people I don't know on the internet, but that's not going to change my life at all. The only thing that's going to change is, what I'm doing next. And I've always had kind of this forward-looking thing, and I've never really cared, what people have said, but sometimes to my detriment, and again, sometimes the true story involved other people, and I'm not going to put that out there because I'm not going to throw anybody else under the bus. There were things I took heat for because I didn't want anybody else to take that heat, because I thought I'm not going to do that to a friend. And I took heat that was more than what I should have taken, but not more than I should have taken. It's what you should have taken because you're a friend.
Well, we also know just how this clickbait society works. I mean, the reality is, what video is going to get more clicks? Buff Bagwell saying that you hurt him and stiffed him and took liberties with him, or Buff Bagwell talking about your charity work with sports programs for underprivileged kids and marching in gay pride parades. And I mean, it's just, it is what it is. And some people just have a hard on for you. Here we go. We got another question.
Conrad, one thing that you brought up is so true is, I would use a lot of that, especially back in the day, as fodder for being a heel. We would always, like I threw Miz out of the dressing room. I wasn't even there when Miz got thrown out of the dressing room. But storyline wise, I took credit for it.
Why not?
So for years, people go, why'd you bully the Miz? Why'd you bully the Miz? As Davey Boy would say, I wasn't even there. I really wasn't. But when he got thrown out of the dressing room, which did happen, they gave me credit for it because it was fit into my character. And a lot of that happened like that. There was a lot of that. I'm sure. Like, I'm not above reproach, and I'm not trying to whitewash. I'm not trying to clean up an image. I'm not trying to do nothing. If you think I'm a jerk, that is your opinion, and you're welcome to that opinion. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to change it.
Lindsay's with us here live, part of our live studio audience, and she wants to know, has there ever been anything Bruce has said on this podcast that you flat out disagree with, or a story that he's told that you dispute a little bit?
No, me and Gerald Briscoe love to say Bruce invented the headlock, invented wrestling, and all this different stuff because Bruce conflates some stories sometimes, as we all do. Nothing major. I mean, nothing major, nothing malicious. Yes, with some facts wrong here or there. Yeah, some minor stuff. I remember guys did a story on me and said I was a 2-time all conference. And so I started 2 years. I started 4 years. I'm freaking consensus All-American. Now, you know what? I don't care. It's just, it's nothing, and nothing is significantly important. The main thing with Bruce, and the main thing is like with you and with so many guys, there's no malice intended.
No.
Zero. I mean, I'd say stuff all the time. I heard Dutch tell a story about me and him being somewhere, and we weren't there. Dutch isn't lying.
Yes.
Now, he's not representing what happened, but Dutch isn't telling a story.
His intent is not to deceive.
His intent is not to deceive. We talked about that so much. Dutch just over the years, I think, remembered us being there. That's not a big deal. It's not material to the story. Is it factually wrong? Yeah, but who cares? It's 30 years ago. Same with Bruce. There's no malice there. There's no something, hey, I'm going to say this to try to change my legacy. I'm going to change this to try to change history. I'm going to try to change this to make me look better. Facts get conflated. We were on the road every single night. And did it matter to us if it was Detroit, Cleveland, LA, or Sacramento? It didn't matter to us. We didn't remember stuff because of that. We remembered events. And sometimes you can picture the dressing room, but not really remember the arena that you were in. But you certainly don't. Oh, I remember that time we were in Stockton and we did this. That just didn't matter to us.
You got any good Dutch Mantell travel stories?
I had so much fun with Dutch. Dutch, one time we were in Yeehaw Junction, and Dutch was coming along, and I love Dutch, by the way.
Wait. What the hell is a Yeehaw Junction? You just said we all know what that is.
Okay, I'm sorry. So if you're in Florida, you know where Yeehaw Junction is. That's where you turn and come to Orlando, coming up from like Miami or something like that, I believe is what it is. But that's where you turn at Yeehaw Junction. That's where Brian Blair, I believe, was told to get in the back of the car and moon Pat Patterson, and he mooned the diner at Yeehaw Junction by mistake, and the Briscoes drove off and left him with his pants down in the parking lot. So it's a pretty famous place. And Dutch, I saw him with what's the guy's name he does the show with? They do a great job.
James, yes.
James, he does a great job. Those guys are all, he is so good. He's so factual. He's really good. He got a great banter about him.
Yes.
And I saw him the other day talking about something, and Dutch said, well, did he mention me? And James said, I'm not sure if he did. So, Dutch, I'm mentioning you. I love you, Dutch. And James, I think you do an incredible job. But we were somewhere around Yeehaw Junction, and Dutch had to make a phone call. And back then, of course, we didn't have cell phones. So, Dutch gets out there on a busy intersection, and he's on the payphone, and he's sitting there calling, and we got the Zubaz on, and we used to pants people all the time with Zubaz. You talk about bullying. Yeah. If you want to call that bullying, yes. Yeah, you can call it whatever the hell you want. It was fun. So Dutch is sitting there, and I went up behind him, and I pantsed him, and I pulled his pants down. He's got those little hairy legs, and he's got his socks up halfway up his calf, and he's got red and white striped briefs, and his shirt is tucked into his briefs. Now imagine that. Dutch Mantell, all that, the hairy guy, he's got his hairy legs, he got his shoes on, and his red and white briefs on, and he's on the phone, and I've stepped on his pants where he can't pull them up. And he's on the phone, and he can't get to it because the cord of the phone. Oh, my God. He was so mad at me. It was great. People are honking. It was tremendous.
What a great story.
Dutch was the best. Dutch was one of the most entertaining guys I've ever been around in my life. We would sit there, and Dutch would just make up stories. He was the greatest roommate. He was the greatest everything. Dutch was fun to be around.
When I asked Jeff Jarrett, if you had your dream car, we're going to be going down the road, we're going to make a trip, and you're going to fill this van up. Who do you want in there just telling stories and holding court? He didn't hesitate. Well, Dutch Mantell, of course.
Yep.
And then he thought about who after that, but Dutch was the go-to.
Dutch was one of the most entertaining guys I've ever been around. He would sit there sometimes and we'd be bored, and Dutch would go, well, I'm going to tell you a story. And he'd sit there, he would make up the story, be a fictional story. And it was the most entertaining shit, but he would make it up on the fly, just going down the road, making up a story, and just for fun, because he wanted to do something. And his brain, he's one of those brains that goes 100 miles an hour when life goes 50. He's ahead of life. And Dutch is a funny dude. I love Dutch.
I want to ask you a question about Terry Funk here. This one comes to us from a Silver Bullet 9442. Any memories of the tag match at Fully Loaded 98? It was Bradshaw and Terry Funk versus Farouk and Scorpio, where Bradshaw abruptly turned heel on Terry Funk because Terry told Bradshaw he was going to retire after the match. This is a forgotten pay-per-view match, but I always had a great memory of it. That is indeed going to be his last televised appearance for the WWE. At least as a wrestler. He had 2 more shows, August 1st and August 2nd. Those were house shows where he worked against Mankind. And that's it for Terry Funk in a WWF ring in 1998. What do you remember about that tag team pay-per-view experience with Terry Funk of all people?
I don't remember if that was the one in Austin, Texas. Was it in Austin, Texas?
Actually, no, it was Fresno, California.
Okay, so we worked in Austin, Texas, maybe right before that when we first put us together. And I remember walking out and the place went ballistic. I mean, went crazy. And we never drew good crowds in Austin. It's funny because we always drew really good crowds in San Antonio, really good crowds in Houston. Depending on the attraction, we did well in Dallas. But Austin, we didn't always do well. So I don't remember how the house was that night. I think it was pretty good. But Austin was always kind of an iffy town for us. And we went out that night, and I remember the crowd just went ballistic. In fact, that was the night that Vader had the heart attack, had to restart his heart. That was the same night that Vader died and revived himself. But after Vader revived himself, me and Terry Funk go out, and the place, goes nuts. And I thought, man, I am freaking over. This is incredible. I can't believe people in Texas love me.
Hang on, let me ask you. Do I have this right? Is it Shotgun Saturday Night at the Frank Irwin Center in Austin, Texas on June 16th? Think about this. What a lineup this is. This is it. I didn't know this match happened, but when we finish recording, I'm going to go see if I can find it. Bradshaw, Dustin Runnels, and Terry Funk. So you got Dustin Rhodes, JBL, and Terry Funk on one side, Jerry Lawler, Brian Christopher, and Scott Taylor on the other side. So you got Funk and Lawler. One of the most legendary feuds of all time, the son of Dusty Rhodes, and you against Jerry Lawler and his son and Scott Taylor. What a 6-man that is. I got to go find that. Yeah,
you talk about being in heaven, but I remember walking out and hearing the crowd pop, and I literally for a second, I thought, man, I'm over. Then I realized I just walked out with Terry Funk in Texas. Yeah. And literally I went to the ring and nobody noticed me. I could have set myself on fire. I could have disappeared. Nobody would have noticed. It was all about Terry Funk. And I just remember thinking, God, this is so freaking cool to be out here with Terry Funk. I grew up, in a position kind of between the two territories where I could get some of the Amarillo wrestling. And we always got Amarillo wrestling with Don Slatton, the lawman out of Abilene, when the Funks would come in. And I'd get to go over there and see them. And then we got the Von Erichs also. So I grew up watching Terry. So this was a huge treat for me. And when I came out and that place went nuts, literally for a second, my stupid self thought, man, I'm over it. Then I realized, nah, I'm with Terry Funk. So, and I tell you, when I turned on him, I came through the Dallas airport, and I used to fly through there all the time. And you know how it is when you fly through the same airport, you get to know people, and people, would always say hi. The only time some guys said something to me, this is back before 9/11 when the security was, so strict as it is now. They were in security. And as I walked through that day, one of them looked at me and goes, that wasn't right last night. And he's an old cowboy. He could tell there was massive heat that I turned on Terry Funk.
Here's a great question from Sidious187. It came to us on Twitter, I believe. How is the esteemed Ron Simmons never had a WWE championship match against JBL during his storied reign? I didn't even think of that at the time. But, man, do you want to talk about full circle? That would have been really cool to have Ron be the babyface for JBL. What was that ever discussed? Were you advocating for that? Was he just not physically able to at that point? Was it a contract issue? What do you remember?
I don't think it was ever advocated. I don't think it was. Ron and I didn't want to work with each other.
Okay.
When we split up as a tag team, we just thought that it was something that I'm not sure why. We'd worked with each other a million times, by the way. So it wasn't like we didn't want to work with each other, period. We just didn't want to do the old tag team split. We were really close friends, but now it's a work. I get all that. We didn't really push for it, me or Ron. But Ron had been hurt. I mean, Ron retired, he's a little bit older than me. Same age he retired as when I retired as well, about the same age, from injuries. And, Ron was a 600-pound bencher. He played nose tackle back when they didn't have any rules. He was with the Steiners and all these guys back in the early 90s with Butch Reed. I mean, he'd taken a beating. And so Ron was in a point where I'm not sure he wanted a match. And I'm not sure physically, how he would have been able to do. He's Ron Simmons, so he would have made it. But I think that was a part of it.
GVB Lover 77 says, since JBL was supposed to be a J.R. Ewing kind of character, I was wondering if John ever met Larry Hagman, and did he have any feedback on the JBL character that he felt like was similar to the J.R. Ewing character?
Yeah, I've been to South Fork Ranch, and I did some vignettes there. Had a lot of fun there, going there and seeing that because I was a huge J.R. Ewing fan. Vince never saw JBL as J.R. Ewing, ever. I've heard an interview he did where they asked about it, and he just looked at it like the guy had three heads. He never saw it that way. I saw it that way. I mean, I saw it as J.R. Ewing ripoff is how I saw it, and a Ted DiBiase ripoff. But Vince didn't see it that way. So there was never association with J.R. Ewing because Vince did not see this as a J.R. Ewing character. Me personally, that's where I got a lot of inspiration from.
Man, that's pretty cool. I know that we talked about him once with JR, and he met Larry, and he didn't feel like Larry was too thrilled that he was calling himself JR and wearing a cowboy hat.
J.R. Ewing, Larry Hagman always wore a cowboy hat through the airports, to kayfabe, and not that anybody thought he was a real J.R. Ewing, but he wanted people to see the character.
Yes. WA2K99 says, why did JBL almost always wear a white cowboy hat? That's an interesting question.
I think it had to do with JBL thought he was the hero.
Yes.
And, JBL thought he was an American hero. JBL thought, a true heel believes they're the hero in the play. And, it may be a perverted version of why you think you're the hero, but you think you're the hero. So JBL always thought he was the hero. So a white hat to JBL wouldn't have wore a black hat. I mean, JBL would think that's for bad guys.
Curtis Frost had a tweet that I thought was kind of interesting. I met JBL, Ron, and Teddy Long at the Hard Rock Cafe during a family vacation in high school. They were nice enough to give me their autographs. But what's the most respectful way to approach a wrestler when you see them in the wild? So that brings about that is a good question. You should answer that for people who are looking to meet a wrestler. But at the same time, I want to know, what is the weirdest experience you've had? Like where someone asked for an autograph and you were like, now? We're doing this now? You have to have one of those.
Oh, yeah. I've had it. I had it in the bathroom. I had to do it at WrestleMania one time during a break. Guy wanted to get a selfie with me while I'm literally at the urinal taking a leak. So it was because I snuck out and gone to a bathroom, and I didn't realize it was a public bathroom. When they see me, they realize that, hey, there's JBL. I've got to get back within 2 minutes to get to the announce table. I didn't realize it was a public bathroom because back then me and Cole did the whole show. So I'd be out there for 5 hours counting the pre-show. And people were trying to take selfies with me while I'm taking a leak. So it was it was a very unique experience.
I can't imagine.
Back in the day, I didn't sign anything. I didn't sign nothing. I mean, I'd go in. I remember one time I was walking into an arena and some lady told me, she goes, hey, listen, I know you're just playing a bad guy, and I want to get my kid's picture with you and some autographs and stuff. And I just looked at her and walked off. And she goes, you're an asshole. Perfect. Yes, I am. But, we kayfabe back then. And, a lot of guys didn't, but, I did. And I always thought I thought it was important, especially around arenas, because that's your hardcore fans. That's why I didn't sell any merchandise in arenas. I didn't want somebody buying a JBL shirt and seeing that on television. It looked like I had a fan. I didn't want a hardcore fan that had sat outside the building to sit there at ringside and say, hey, man, I met JBL back there. He's nothing like his character. He's really a nice guy, because that spreads. And I think it hurts you. Right or wrong, that's how I did. That's how I was broke into the business. I know it's changed, but it was changing then too. It was rare that I was one of the ones that still did that.
Great question here from someone somewhere. He says, was there ever a time a talent asked you to take a little something off the clothesline from hell? Also, is there a time where you delivered a clothesline from hell and immediately thought, oh shit, I killed him? Thank you. And you're doing great on the pod. You know, years ago when I was talking to Mick Foley, he told me that there were two types of mandible claws. One where it was a working mandible claw, no insertion. And then the real mandible claw, of course, he's not actually going to apply a bunch of pressure. Were there two versions of the clothesline from hell?
Of course there is. Yeah, of course there is. You know, you've got certain clotheslines, and the main thing is the clothesline from hell. You have to understand if the guy bumps well, it looks terrific. Nobody gets hurt. If the guy didn't bump well, we both get hurt. So, you know, I'm always, especially if I'm going around like on Independence or something. You know, you don't know how a guy's going to take it, and if they freeze up and stand there and turn. I mean, you can blow out a bicep, you can blow out a shoulder. You're going to hurt them. You're going to hurt yourself. And so you want to be higher. You want to be more into the body so there's a lot more contact being made in case they don't know how to bump. Now, as far as just maliciousness, not necessarily. I mean, you know, the clothesline, it was always a finish. It was usually filmed. So I usually always had to deliver it in a way that made it look good, whether it was a guy that you liked very much or a guy that you didn't know very well.
John, we are recording right now on Friday morning, and I know that this show comes out on Monday. So I apologize, but this is probably old news to a lot of you as you're listening right now. But in the last 10 minutes, we've got a tweet from Vince McMahon that I need to share with you, John. The case is closed. Today ends nearly 3 years of investigation by different governmental agencies. There's been a great deal of speculation about what exactly the government was investigating and what the outcome would be. As today's resolution shows, much of that speculation was misguided and misleading. In the end, there was never anything more to this than minor accounting errors with regard to some personal payments that I made several years ago while I was CEO of WWE. I'm thrilled that I can now put all of this behind me. We haven't heard from Vince in a while. So for him to come out and have a statement like this, where it starts with the case is closed, that's going to be big news that everybody's talking about all weekend. Obviously you're getting this fresh just as I am. What do you make of that?
My first meeting with Vince when I went up to Titan Towers, you know, I didn't meet him when I had the tryout match. I met him later, you know, and as I've said before, you know, I kind of fell into Vince's lap. He didn't go looking for me. I just kind of showed up at his doorstep, and I remember walking in, and I'd heard everything about him. I mean, everything, you know, back in the day, man, there were rumors that were worse than what they are now. As far as, you know, you name it, there were rumors. You know, it tends to happen when you have a guy who doesn't respond. You know, Vince doesn't respond to a lot of stuff. He didn't back then either. So when you make up a rumor, it just kind of takes a life of its own, whether it's true or not. And I remember sitting there with Vince, and he sat there and he said, I told the government, and he put up his middle finger like that, and he said, and I beat him. He said, not worried about it at all. And I remember thinking, this is a ballsy dude, man. This he ain't scared of nothing. Now, not talking about the veracity of any of these claims or stuff, but Vince has won lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. He doesn't settle, not normally. He's willing to fight. He's got a great attorneys, and he's willing to prove. He's one of the few guys, you know, that has money that's willing to prove that he is right about things. And I say right, that's going to get all kinds of, you know, right about stuff like this. I don't know any stuff about these other claims that, you know, have been there. I didn't hear about them when I was there, and I'm reading about them like everybody else. Don't know any of the truth or not of any of them.
We got another question from Andrew Dice Clay, one of the best follows over on Twitter. He says, was JBL as angry as he seemed on the Bite This episode when the Ultimate Warrior referred to Draws as a cripple?
I don't remember it that well. I kind of remember it a little bit. Yeah, I don't remember it that well. I think it's classless, absolutely classless. Hearing it right now, I think it's absolutely classless, 100%. Now, is this something that I would have done in character, which is kind of how I, you know, figure things out? Whether it's
you would have been a heel, so you wouldn't. I mean, you weren't saying he was a cripple. Ultimate Warrior did, and you went the fuck off on the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, and what I was saying was what I have done this as a character.
That sounds like real Layfield though. Getting fired up about calling a guy.
Yeah, I thought the world of Draws. We went hunting together. We were friends. Yeah, I don't remember this, but I think that's a real piece of shit move, if that's what he said. Absolutely classless. If you're doing this in a work and Draws is in on it, I get it. But from just listening to this, I think it's absolutely classless.
James says, what was JBL's opinion of the Sandman's entrance at ECW One Night Stand in 05 while he was in the balcony looking down at it? Also, was there any talk about it backstage of Vince McMahon's reaction to it?
Not the reaction, but I thought it was incredible. That entrance was one of the greatest of all time. There's no doubt about it. That Sandman entrance, man, you had to see that freaking thing live. That was awesome. I am so glad I got to see it because I didn't understand it until you see it live. And, forget about, does the work follow up with it? Who cares? It was one of the greatest entrances ever. I just thought, I don't know how they hit it out of the park so well with that, but that was really fun to watch. I remember one of those nights we had with ECW. I remember telling Vince, I said, we're leveraging our whole company, putting these guys over. I said, is this what you want? And he said, yep, that's what I want. He was wanting to, make it work. But, these guys were great workers. I mean, a lot of people that mistake ECW, mistake the fact that there were a lot of great workers there. Now, when I talk about Sandman, I'm not sure I'm talking about the great working part of it. The entrance was incredible. Absolutely incredible. That to me is great working. But you had RVD, you had Sabu, you had so many guys who do some really good stuff. The Dudleys were doing good stuff. I mean, these guys really got over. And there's a reason that people today will chant ECW over a federation that was just around for half a decade or a decade, has been gone for 20 years. That's pretty remarkable. They don't chant WWE. They don't chant WCW. They will chant ECW. That was a remarkable place.
Aldo Manuel Banda says, can John tell the story behind the time him and Ron Simmons gave Howard Finkel the wedgie from hell?
Oh my God. I can't believe somebody hadn't brought this up before. This is great. So Ron and I, we won Howard Finkel in a poker contest.
What a sentence. We won Howard Finkel.
Yeah, we won. I think it was Mr. Hughes bet him or something. I can't remember who it was. We won Howard Finkel in a poker contest. So it was I guess it was a ribald how. I have no idea. So with that night, Howard's going to cause us to lose. And we're going to last thing you're going to see is get ready to squeal like a big boy. That's what they want us to say. So listen, it's a work. People are going to say, oh my God, that's over the top. You think? Yeah, of course it's over the top. It's a work. So they tell Howard. Howard's wife calls Titan Towers and says, you better not do this. So the whole thing that day is like, we and Ron don't know what we're doing because Howard did not want to do it. I mean, he's in tears almost. And so it's a work. I get it. People are going to look at this and go, oh my God, this shows you how bad it was back then. I will finish this in just a minute. Now, and if you think that's bad, the fans are worse. So I will tell that point in just a minute. So Vince would, Howard, are you a man or a mouse?
Oh,
because his wife was calling Titan Towers. So anyway, we do the scene with him, and they had talked us out. They watered it down somewhat. That was the first. But that's pretty much how the scene ended, was get ready to squeal like a big boy. And it's like the freaking deliverance scene. So the next week, we think we're going to walk out and people are going to like boo the shit out of us. Cause like, dude, these guys just like, these are the deliverance boys. They cheered us. The fans cheered us over that.
My God.
It was crazy. It was one of the craziest moments ever. And I'll tell you one of the best parts. Ron came in, he goes, what are we doing? I said, I don't know. I think we're banging Howard. He goes, yeah, what segment? Didn't even care. Didn't even care at all. That's how little we cared about stuff like that. It was a work to us. And it was.
I love that.
Yeah.
What segment? What a great answer.
What segment?
Bobby wants to know, what did John think of the brief pairing with Bear and Corbin? And what were the plans laid out when this idea was initially drawn up?
No plans were laid out. They called me when I were in Oklahoma, and they said, "Would you come cut a promo in Oklahoma?" I'd fly myself in for that. I'd do it right now. I'd cut a promo in Oklahoma. I've been doing that my whole freaking life. So, half my relatives are up there, but we need a wall in this country, not between Texas and Mexico, between Texas and Oklahoma. Keep them damn Okies out of the promised land. So, but in their defense, they have shiny meth labs and nice bingo parlors up in Oklahoma, but they wanted me to come in and do a promo on Oklahoma. That's easy. I grew up, with the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry, the Red River Shootout, which they don't call that anymore for political reasons, politically correct reasons. And so when I came in, and then the next week they said, "Hey, you're going to be in so-and-so." And I said, "For what?" They go, "Well, you're with Baron." I go, "Okay." So I went and did their show. And then they sent me like a list of dates. And I said, "Am I doing something here?" And they said, "Yeah, you're with Baron." But there was never in my knowledge any long-term plan with it. So I don't know where they were going and what they were going to do. I feel bad because, it didn't work. And I'm the veteran. Barron's a very talented young guy. He's a smart guy. He's a very athletic guy. Just won some jiu-jitsu championship. He's a shooter, played pro football, so it didn't work. It's, my fault for not working. But I don't know where they were planning on going with it, and I like Barron. And I was hoping they'd do something with it, but then all of a sudden the whole thing just got shuttered, and I never knew. I don't know if there was a long-term plan. I don't think there was. I think they just brought me in and thought, well, that worked. Let's try it again. And so we did it again, but the creative wasn't matching the storyline, I didn't think. They were beating Barron a lot. So I don't know what happened, and I don't know where the storyline was going to go. I think Barron's still got a pretty bright future. I love the fact that he did something and won that jiu-jitsu contest, whatever it was he won, outside of wrestling. Make a name for yourself somewhere else, and I think he'll pop up somewhere else, and I hope he does because I think Barron's a good guy and a smart guy.
I'm pulling for him. His real name is Tom, and he's a watch guy like me, and we know he's into jiu-jitsu. And I don't know if you saw the rumor and innuendo, but apparently New Japan has interest in him. Can you imagine how great he would be there?
He'd be great over there. The shooter boys do so well over there, and if he just meshed that style into a little bit of it, I think Barron would do great over there. Plus, he's a big guy. He's a big athletic guy. He played pro football.
That's what I'm going to say. Like, this is a pro football player who now is learning jiu-jitsu and is good at winning jiu-jitsu. And, oh, by the way, a pro wrestler. This is a badass dude.
Absolutely. He's a Golden Glove champion boxer.
Wow.
Barron's a legit dude. I liked being with Barron. I thought Barron, he's a big, tall guy like me, so it's easy to manage a guy like that. I thought Barron has a terrific – he's had a great past. I think he's got a great future ahead of him. And I certainly hope he does because he's one of the good guys, and I'm rooting for him.
Is it bad that the thing I remember most about you managing Barron is that you borrowed Michael Hayes' pants that day?
Yeah. I don't know what happened. The pants, I don't know. I think they looked worse than they were. But then after I wore them, I thought, shit, I got to wear them now because everybody's making fun of them.
I mean, I would say you went to the same tailor, but I think that's the trouble with Mr. Hayes is he doesn't go to a tailor. But that was, I don't know why, but I remember seeing it and thinking, did he forget his pants and they just sent somebody to Men's Warehouse? What happened there?
But then after you wear them, everybody makes fun of them. I'm not switching now. I'm not going to the skinny jeans. I got more ass than a donkey farm, and I want to have pants that are appropriate.
Nicola R91 suggests, would you ever do an episode of a year-by-year breakdown of the salary you made in the wrestling business? I don't necessarily know that we should do that, but I do want to ask, without saying the number, do you remember what your best year was financially in the wrestling business? Was it when you were the champ, or as the business continued to grow? Is it when you were doing commentary, or what year do you think it was when you were like, hey, that was my best year in wrestling?
05 or 04, whenever it was as a champ. I remember almost down to the dollar. Yeah, absolutely. Because, obviously the most I've ever made, and it was wonderful. And yeah, I remember it very well. It was 05. It was the year I was champion. And I mean, Vince is one of the best paid guys ever. And I would never go through that. There's a confidentiality clause in contracts. And I always thought a contract was between me and Vince, Vince, Kevin, or however you want to say it. And I always thought that was a violation of trust to give anything out like that. Now, some people see that differently, and that's their own prerogative. But I just never thought it was right to give out anything that was something like that was pretty much a handshake deal or signed contract with Vince. I will tell you this. I've said it before, and I'll say it. I don't mind saying it. My first year with WWE, I made $77,000. I've said that before because that was so long ago. That was different contracts back then. That was the old booking contract where you got the 10 days for $150 a day was the only guarantee you had. But I worked. Now, the reason I say that is that's the most money I ever made. So don't get me wrong. I was thrilled to be making that money. But when you're on the road 300 days a year, 300 hotels, 300 days of rental car, and then you got to come home. You also got a mortgage and a car payment at home, and you got to pay taxes out of that. I mean, that you think, $77,000 in 95 and 96, it's great money. But man, it didn't go very far when you had all the expenses that we had.
One last question, then we'll put a button on Ask JBL Anything, but we got to do another one of these sometime soon. Keith wants to know, John, who would you like to see John Cena face in his very last match?
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Cody, obviously. I'd love to see against Cody for the title. I think that's the biggest matchup in wrestling, and I think it'd be fantastic. I think those two guys, they're both very smart guys, and I think that would be absolutely incredible. But if it's Randy, if it's Brock, it's Roman, Cena's not going to have a bad match. I promise you that. And all those guys I mentioned can really work. But I'd love to see him against Cody. Headline WrestleMania for the title. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Is he going to break the famous record or not? I think that'd be incredible.
Stay tuned. I can't wait to see what's coming next for John Cena, but I know we'll all be watching it. And I hope that you'll be watching next week. SomethingToWrestle.com is your home for all things Something to Wrestle. And next week, John, our topic is backstage fights. Everything you've seen in the hallowed halls of WWE, Japan, Germany, Mexico. We're going to really pull the curtain back next week and talk about some real badass shit. And we want to hear from you. If you got questions about some of these dust ups or maybe when some of those rounds went live, we want to hear from you. So hit us up with those questions. Find us on social media. It's at Pritchard Show. That's where you can find the show over on Twitter. It's Something to Wrestle on Facebook, Something to Wrestle on Instagram. And of course, John is on Instagram at John Bradshaw Layfield. You can find him on Twitter at JC Layfield. And John, I had a great time today, man. I'm glad that you're back and you're out of the snow and you're no longer stuck eating Denny's. And man, what was Al Snow's wife doing? Can we not get Al Snow to come take care of you? Why would you have to eat freaking Denny's every day for 3 days? That's not fair. We got to get on it. We got to.
In defense of Al Snow, I did not let him know I was stuck.
Oh, okay.
Because I knew he would try to remedy the situation and try to come take care of me. So I did not. If Al hears this will be the first that he's heard of it. So I did not.
I wanted to bury him on the show and have fun with that.
But burying Al is fine too. Hey, Doug Basham's got some real heat down there in OVW. That was fun to watch. That was fun to watch Doug get the title and the reaction from the crowd. He's got some real heat down there.
What did you think of the OVW Netflix series?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I think it's great. It's how they follow up on it, which I think is what they're doing now. With trying to figure that out. I think there's some real opportunities for people, and I hope they do another one. I know there's potential that they could do something else with Netflix, and I hope they do. I think it really helped Al and helped what he was doing. It's tough when you're just running shows. I mean, man, it's a tough business model. As they say, you want to get a $500,000, start with $1 million and become a wrestling promoter. It's tough business model, and Al's working really hard and figuring it out.
I know we're busting Al's balls a little bit here today, but just as a reminder, and I know people will poke holes in this, OVW was on Netflix before WWE. Shout out to Al. We'll be back next week right here talking all things WWE and John's experience. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, tell your friends, and don't forget, if you can't get enough John, you can catch him on his real show, Stories with Bradshaw or Briscoe and Bradshaw. It's available anywhere you enjoy podcasts. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And John, at this point, you guys have talked to well over 100 legends, maybe 2 or 3 or maybe even 4. I mean, every single week it's somebody new. And you told me before we clicked record, you recently caught up with Leonard Skinner. Man, you guys are branching out now.
We're having blast. We're interviewing a bunch of rock guys. It's unbelievable the amount of guests we're getting. It's so cool. And people treat us like contemporaries, and for one, Ricky Medville was one of the original members, the original drummer of Leonard Skinner. And he's the one that produced the Michael Hayes video. So I text Michael. I said, "Hey, do you know Ricky?" He goes, "Oh my God, yeah." And he starts telling me all this stuff about it. You know, less people have such an association to wrestling because we're all in the same arenas. And there's a contemporary feel like, hey, we're all kind of part of the same business, part of this entertainment business. And so it's a little different dynamic when we interview people, that it's not just a reporter interviewing somebody. It's kind of more of a contemporary, which is kind of how we want to position everything we do. It's certainly that way with the wrestlers. You know, we have probably more talent, old legends, probably than anybody, I would think, on our YouTube channel. We have, you know, long interviews. All we're trying to do is record history in their words. You know, we want to tell stories, we want to have fun, but we want to let them tell history in their words and record that and have it somewhere for, you know, long after we're all gone, that history is maintained.
Preserving history. That's what it's all about at Briscoe and Bradshaw. Check it out anywhere you enjoy podcasts, and stay tuned. More John Layfield on deck next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.